vehicles, and that's why we're here today together to discuss this issue. So thank you for being here, and we're going to start with 3 keynote presentations, followed by a panel. The keynote presentations will be Ms. Viviane Heijnen, Minister of Environment of the Netherlands, Ms. Tatjana Molsian, the Executive Secretary of UNEC, the Economic Commission for Europe, and Ms. Jung Tae Kim, Secretary General of the International Transport Forum at the OECD. So I think we start with Ms. Heijnen. Thank you for hosting us today and organizing this, and I make place for you.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It's quite early day today, and I'm honored to welcome you here to this key event at COP28 in Dubai. At many COP events, we're looking at how to transform our current fossil fuel-based transport systems into zero-emission systems. And we're sharing best practices to make sure that all countries are encouraged and equipped to make the transition that we have to make. But while we focus on a zero-emission future, we also need to minimize the environmental impact of second-hand vehicles and fossil fuels that are currently exported and imported around the globe. I'd like to tell you about the Netherlands' commitment to sustainable mobility and the impact of our policies on international trade in low-quality fuels and used vehicles. We've been actively promoting the quality of fuels destined for exports to countries outside the European Union. In August of 2022, we put an administrative rule into action aimed at regulating the quality of petrol and diesel exports. We've been making sure the policy's strict specifications are enforced, and as a result, our exported fuels now meet higher environmental and health-related standards. We're also working within the Benelux Union on a potential policy rule. In 2023, the European Commission adopted new legislation requiring a roadworthiness certificate for used vehicles that are exported from the EU. The intention is to prevent the negative impacts of such exports, as well as to support importing countries' legislation. It's an important contribution to address the challenges related to trade in used vehicles. Despite the introduction of harmonized rules in some countries, enforcement remains a challenge. One of our key objectives today is to emphasize the importance of international standards and regulations in addressing the challenges we face in the global transport sector. The Netherlands is advocating for the adoption of a resolution at UNEA 6, aiming at establishing minimum standards for exported fuels and used vehicles, and for supporting importing countries in implementing national standards on imported fuels and vehicles. We welcome the active participation of both exporting and importing countries in this significant endeavor, in which we collaborate with the European Commission and with UNEP. Implementing harmonized fuel quality and used vehicle requirements on a global scale is a necessary step towards achieving a level playing field and preventing the shift of activities to other regions. The harmonization of rules can make the global trade in fuels and used vehicles more attractive. Exporters may face difficulties when encountering different rules in various markets. Additionally, it is important to comply with the standards set by importing countries. This is not an issue to be addressed bilaterally. It's a global, transboundary problem that requires global commitment. I'm very honored to have the privilege of collaborating with the highly regarded speakers on this panel, representing influential organizations and countries. Together, we are united in our pursuit of common goals towards a more sustainable and circular economy for all people around the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Heijnen, and also thank you for taking leadership in this issue globally and in the European Union. Our next keynote speaker is Ms. Molsian from the UNECE. And UNECE has been for many years leading setting standards for cleaner fuels and specifically cleaner vehicles.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to the hosts and for organizing this important discussions today. I think both the Minister and Rob, you have already set the scene and explained why it's important to discuss this particular subject, why used cars, why fuels, why we discuss this when we address the climate. But let me still remind some of the costs and the impact of this sector, of the transport sector. We have talked about the environmental impact, but also we have 1.36 million fatalities on roads per year and more than 50 million people severely injured. And this is also with an economic impact of up to 5% of GDP for countries worldwide. Also, according to WHO, to our colleagues from the World Health Organization, outdoor air pollution from transport prematurely kills 4.2 million people per year. And as we've heard many times at COP, here at COP and in different meetings, transport is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, generating almost a quarter of them. So this is the general context. How do we address this? At UNEC, first I would like to draw your attention that the Inland Transport Committee is expected to adopt the new strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from inland transport by 2050. And we will have a dedicated event, I think, on the 6th of December in the SDG Pavilion to talk more about this. But as many of you know very well, UNEC main strength is actually its normative and regulatory activity and setting standards. And we have more than 60, we are hosting more than 60 legal instruments that make the transport sector more sustainable in a broad range of areas, including from transport of dangerous goods, intermodal and multimodal transport, to technical regulations for road vehicles. And our regulations really shift towards low carbon modes of transport to lower the emissions and energy consumptions of the vehicles available on the global market. You have mentioned, I think, the question why we don't discuss the new and the electric vehicles. Not in the sessions, but we are working very much and very closely exactly on electric vehicles as well, and safe and long-lasting. But what we really need to address, and what we are discussing today, how we address circularity. We are developing this global approach to measure the carbon footprint of road vehicles, looking at all phases, so both from material extraction, manufacturing, use, and end of life. So used car, end of life, it's also important. Together with UNEP and other partners, we have seen that many countries rely heavily on important used vehicles for their fleet at a local level. At times, this was seen as a breach of the Basel Convention ban on the export of waste, with vehicles that are not roadworthy or not safe being sent to low-income countries to be used while generating high level of pollution, or being dismantled or abandoned. So at UNEC, we have developed regulations that are used globally to make sure road vehicles are safe and clean, not only when new, but during their whole life, as we say. The World Forum for Harmonized Vehicle Regulations has initiated dedicated activities already, quite a wide range. We have very good examples of cooperation and under the leadership of many countries like South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Netherlands, the US. And what we are doing together is really to provide the necessary regulations when it comes to safety and environmental protection for both new and used vehicles for countries in different economic situations, so we ensure the same standards. It's also important that at UNEC we are hosting the UN Road Safety Fund, and it has financed already many activities together with UNEC and UNEP in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And what is the main aim is that we ensure that high-quality used vehicle get exported or imported, and that the minimum levels of safety and environment protection are guaranteed regardless of the country where the vehicles go. That is a challenging environment, I have to say. You tend to listen to the neighbors, what they are saying throughout the speech. But a very important area, and this is why I want to highlight that we are working also with the country exporting countries. You've mentioned North, Global South. I would say that in certain cases it's also East. For example, in the UNIC region, we have to take, it's not only Global South. I mean, the problem with the used vehicles is much wider. But we are working together with exporting countries to ensure that tests and inspections are done prior to exports. And also we work with the countries of destination or country that import and transit as well, using digital tools to prevent tampering of vehicle information. This is also very important. And in all these joint efforts that we are doing with many partners, with UNEP, with the IFC, we are doing to really ensure that this is beneficial, again, when it comes to safety, air pollution, energy demand, and accessibility. This is a small part of what we are doing, but I think this is an area where we can really make a change and make a change fast. This is where we can work together in order to ensure the proper regulations are in place, but that they are also enforced in the countries, both of origin but also destinations. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward for the discussions that will follow.
Thank you, Ms. Malseyen, and thank you for reminding us how important this issue also is for road safety. There are studies that show if we introduce quality standards for used vehicles, there can be a reduction of 40 to 50% of road fatalities in the vehicle because of that measure. So about 3 years ago, UNEP did the first ever study on the trade in used vehicles. We found out that, for example, the country that I live, Kenya, 97% of the vehicles being added to the fleet are used vehicles. 3% are new vehicles. So this shows how important this issue is. So over the past years, we've used the data that UNEP generated to work on this issue. But now I'm very pleased that our friends at ITF have done a new report on used vehicles, and they basically have gone one step further. And I think we're going to hear from Mr. Kim about the work that ITF has done on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for joining us today at this important event, tackling second-hand vehicles and fuel exports to emerging economies. In fact, I have to tell you a little bit about ITF, who do not know about our organization. And we are composed of 66 member countries from around the world, but 44 countries are from Europe. So it's a bit Euro-focused, but basically we work with the world. And we publish between 30 and 60 reports every year. So anyone can download it for free from our website in PDF format. So we have all the reports placed on our website that we published during the past several years. So you can take them as much as you can. And also, we are not regulator, we are forum, F means forum, and we are supporting regulators like UNEC and European Union, and to provide them with evidence and analytic information, because we know where we are going, but we need evidence and we need some tools to convince other people how to implement our policies in a more relevant way. So, saying that, and I will go to the today's topic, and the cars account for 1/3 of transport CO2 emissions, as mentioned, the executive director of UNEC, almost 23%, 25%. The climate change is a global challenge, so that's why we are dealing with Global South as well. It's not only about the advanced countries and a small number of countries. So we must support all countries to decarbonize. And 1/4 of the world's population live in countries that import large amounts of second-hand cars. And unfortunately, many of these used vehicles are old and in poor condition. And this has negative impacts for road safety, air pollution, and the environment. And tackling this problem requires international collaboration. And at the ITF, we work with currently 66 members, but we will have, again, a new member next year because Oman applied for membership, and we are waiting for other countries to join the ITF as well. So we'll have definitely 67 next year. And also international organizations and many other stakeholders, even NGO and member countries. And today, I have a great pleasure of launching our latest report. So the title is New But Used. So for some it's new, but basically it's a used cars. And this is very the new edition of our the reports. And the electric vehicle transition and the global second-hand car trade. So traditionally, when we talk about transport, we think about creating infrastructure and maintenance of roads and so on and so on. But nowadays, we are adding more dimensions. So we begin to talk about social aspect and trade issues and also sanitary issues passing through a very difficult period. But our report explores the current global trade in used vehicles and how it may change in future. So it explores future regional changes in used vehicles, also investigates if new technologies like electric vehicles will be exported from developed economies in the future. So these topics are essential to understand how to tackle the problems of today's used car trade, but also the future challenges of meeting the climate goals of the Paris Agreement. So maybe we will look at the slide one. Historically speaking, Europe, Japan, and Korea, and North America have been the major exporters of used vehicles to emerging economies. I think the slide is not perfect. We don't have any numbers, but I can explain. And however, we find that a seismic shift is underway. And China is the largest global market for new car sales. And it could also become a major market for used car exports in the future. Okay. And in 2019, the Chinese government lifted its export ban on used vehicles. So we expect that China's used vehicle exports could be larger than those of all OECD countries combined in the next decade. This could dramatically change the global trade in used vehicles, as can be seen in this figure. And the other major change will be the transition to electric vehicles. And as developed nations embrace electric vehicles, they are increasingly exporting unwanted combustion engine vehicles to emerging markets. To address this flood of old vehicles, the governments must implement measures to restrict the sale of highly polluting conventional vehicles and fuels. In the long term, emerging markets will need to import used electric vehicles to decarbonize their vehicles fleet. Developed countries may be tempted to restrict the export of used electric vehicles, but we caution against this. Otherwise, the decarbonization of transport will not be global. Governments in developed economies need to support emerging markets to properly dispose of electric vehicles at their end of life. The final recommendation from our report is that governments should improve the traceability of used vehicles. We find that used vehicle exports are regularly underreported. This makes it difficult to enforce regulations and ensure that vehicles are disposed of safely. To write this report, we worked with the statistical ministries of our member countries to receive their data on used vehicles. We will continue doing research on this topic and will be making all the data we have collected publicly available to help others work on this topic too. The project was kindly funded by a member of our corporate partners board. We have Toyota present in the audience, and which is the main body that helps the ITF interact with the private sector. In conclusion, the electric vehicle transition presents a unique set of challenges and opportunities in the realm of used vehicles. So by taking decisive action now, the governments can ensure a smoother and more sustainable global transition to electric vehicles to meet the Paris Agreement goals. So thank you for your attention. This was simple, but you can download our report freely from our website immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kim, and I really recommend everybody to have a look at this report. It's brief, clear, and it's very important because it says if you don't get some framework of policies in place today, in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we'll see an avalanche of poor quality used vehicles going from the north to the south. And so I think it's a very strong signal that, that what we're working on to regulate used vehicles, we only have a short window of opportunity to do so. So thanks again for the 3 keynote speakers. I think they've set a fantastic foundation for our discussion now. We're now going to the panel, and I do ask you, please think about some questions, because I'm going to try and see if we can also have some time for some questions in the audience. I see people are nodding and writing down, so I will try to see if there's some opportunities for some questions. But we're first going to listen to our members in the panel. So on our panel members, we have Ms. Heijnen again, the Minister of Environment of the Netherlands. We have Honorable Frederick Cheng Adom, who's the Deputy Minister for Transport from Ghana. Welcome, sir. We have Mr. Frans Wekers, who is the Secretary General of the Benelux. And Benelux is the organization where Belgium, Netherlands and Luxembourg are working together, and we'll find out why those 3 countries play a crucial role in this issue. And lastly, we have Mr. Mustafa Lamoort, who's the Executive Director, and this is a very long title, there we go, for Health, Safety, Environment and Community of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. Welcome, sir, and good that you could join us today. So, what I'll do as moderator, I'll ask some questions from the panel first, and then let's see if we can open up a little bit. Let me start on the far side and with the only lady on the panel, Ms. Heijnen. Then, as you said, the Netherlands has taken a very proactive role, and they've said, we're not going to export fuels from our ports that are not allowed on our roads. And so they were the first ones ever to say we're going to want to have quality as export. This has happened now. The Netherlands has acted, but obviously the market in the Netherlands doesn't completely regulate it. So what are the next steps for the Netherlands to keep pushing this issue at the international level? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we've seen notable improvements in the quality of Dutch fuel since the introduction of our policy, but we still have to pay close attention to the quality for the time to come. So that means that our inspectorate also continues to check if the standards are still okay. I think that the Dutch experience can also serve as a valuable example for other countries to do the same. So we will share our knowledge, and I'm really hoping that the meeting that we have, the UNEP 6 conference, that we will use that also to share our expertise and to see if we can make further steps. And additionally, what we really think is that if it comes to end-of-life vehicle regulation, we're really supportive of the European action that is being taken. I think it's very important to also regulate it on a European level, so that at least we can take our responsibility that we're not exporting cars, vehicles that don't live up to standards, and we are basically exporting our problem to a different part of the world, because that's not acceptable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to Ghana. Like the Netherlands is an example in Europe taking leadership, Ghana is an example in West Africa or even Africa taking leadership with the introduction of fuels and vehicle standards. Now recently, or some time ago, the ECOWAS, which is the West African group of countries, also adopted some standards. So what are the next steps for Ghana in the introduction of cleaner fuels and vehicle standards?
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. With Ghana, I think we have made significant strides when it comes to cleaner fuels. As of now, when you talk about leaded fuel, it's been banned in Ghana completely. We do not have any form of leaded fuel in Ghana. And in Ghana also, the sulfur standard of our fuels are also around 50 ppm as at now. It is 50 ppm, although we are working hard to make it even better. You could even compare this with previously we had more than 3,000 ppm sulfur standards. I think it's a good strides we are working on now. So I think Ghana is making a headway into transitioning to cleaner fuels.
Okay, thank you very much. I have some questions. I may come back to you on that. But let's first move on to Mr. Wekers. Benelux, Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg working together. Netherlands and Belgium are major exporters of those used vehicles, of those fuels from the ports in those countries to Africa. Is there a role for the Benelux?
There's definitely a role for the Benelux, but let me first congratulate Viviane Heijnen, Minister of Environment in the Netherlands, by taking the initiative and to take leadership in Northwest Europe on this item. And why is it important that we cooperate in the Benelux? The Benelux Union, as you said, is the cooperation of Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg. And we are 3 of the 6 founding fathers of the European Union. And we are also a precursor and living lab for the European Union as 3 countries and as Benelux Union. And by taking that leadership by the Netherlands and put it on the agenda in the Benelux, in our working group of experts on clean air, Belgium and Luxembourg is taken on board. So the Netherlands already drafted the new law last year. Belgium is ready for a royal decree in March of 2024. And the good example of the Netherlands is mirrored more or less by the Belgian government. And why is it important that the Netherlands and Belgium cooperate so good together? Because the 2 ports, the port of Rotterdam and the port of Antwerp, are the biggest export ports out of Europe. So more than 50% of fuel is exported from one of those 2 ports.
Right.
And if you wouldn't cooperate, well, then it will be a race to the bottom. Then the Netherlands can put a ban on export, but when it goes from Antwerp, well, that's no solution. So that's why I think that the Benelux cooperation is very good. To have, let's say, more or less united legislation. And the Benelux can also put, and the ministers of the Benelux countries put it also on the European agenda. Then most likely in future there will also be European legislation about.
Okay. Thank you for taking the leadership as Benelux and trying to bring this to a harmonized standard. As you said, we don't want to have a race to the bottom, but we want to have a level playing field.
Yes.
And we need organizations like yours to create that level playing field. Thank you. Let's move to Nigeria. Nigeria, of course, is the powerhouse in West Africa, if not one of the powerhouses in Africa. I'm always told what Nigeria decides and does, others follow in West Africa. So we've seen quite some interesting developments in Nigeria recently when it comes to fuels and vehicles. The Nigerian government, the new president, decided to stop the fuel subsidy. And also, I think very soon we're going to see a very big refinery going online, Dangote, in Nigeria, that will produce top-level quality fuel. So with these developments, do you think there is in the next year or so, the opportunity for Nigeria to introduce also fuels and vehicle standards? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to introduce my organization, Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. We are responsible for ensuring fuel quality. We work hand in hand with other organizations like the Standard Organization of Nigeria, other environmental organizations, to make sure that we also ensure like used vehicles, meet standard. The journey for clean fuel in Nigeria has been a complex one. While on one hand, we appreciate the fact to protect our environment and also human health, the issue of product refining capacity and pricing has kind of like hampered our journey. At the moment, we are using or adopting the 2006 standard protocol for quality of fuel, which actually limits sulfur content to 3,000 ppm for PMS and 1,000 for AGO. But going further, we have a 2017 regulation in place, which we are trying to implement. That will actually bring down the level of sulfur content to 150 ppm, both in PMS and AGO. But this has been the journey, but we have a clear line of sight, of attaining that ultra, quality fuel, basically Afri-6, or if you relate it to European standard, which is Euro 5. You just mentioned the Dangote refinery, which will come on stream in the next few months. Basically, Q1 2024 is a set date for the commencement of, refining and production from Dangote refinery. Dangote refinery is designed to produce fuel quality, at a maximum limit of 10 ppm. So that's very good. In addition to other refinery, the other 4 NNPCL refinery are undergoing various maintenance. And we're also looking at upgrading the quality of that refinery. So when it comes to used vehicle, we know 60% of used vehicle in Africa generally that are added to the fleets are used vehicle. Vehicles are added as used vehicle. So the practice in the past is for individual countries to come up with their regulation. Very few countries have done that. Nigeria is one. Egypt, Morocco, and Kenya. But last year, from the sub-regional level, ECOWAS, as you rightly mentioned, came up with its own standard, basically setting 5 years for used vehicle, and I think, Euro 4 standard for used vehicle from 2022 January. But countries have 10-year period to comply to that regulation. So in Nigeria, what we've done last year is actually to reduce the number of years, to limit from 15 years to 12 years. So we're in course both in, getting our fuel quality and setting the standard for used vehicle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and excellent progress on Nigeria's side. Very promising. So if I listen, a lot of progress from the Netherlands, a lot of progress from the European Commission, a lot of progress from Benelux. Ghana and Nigeria are moving. Sounds like we have a solvable problem. It sounds like we have something we can fix in the near future. Or is it not so simple? Are there any questions or comments from people in the audience at this moment? When you think about it, you also think maybe there's an empty chair here. It's not for any of you to go and sit down, but we have a mystery guest, which I can tell who it is. That is my boss, and she's a bit late, but she's still supposed to join us, Ms. Anderson, the head of UNEP, so we keep a chair for her open. Any questions from anybody? Comments? Please go ahead, sir. Maybe you can introduce yourself quickly, and then go ahead. Oh, sorry, I haven't.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rubal Dua. I'm a researcher at CAPSAC. It's an energy think tank located in Saudi Arabia. My question was around the export of electric vehicles. It was mentioned in the opening remarks. And I was curious, most countries, because electric vehicles have batteries, batteries have critical metals, and as part of their critical metal security policy, they're planning to restrict exports of electric vehicles out of their sovereign borders. For instance, Japan, Toyota, from what I understand, is only leasing electric vehicles. They're not selling them right now. So I'm curious, is this actually gonna, because I heard you said there'll be an avalanche of EV exports. I'm hearing the other way around as well, that countries, as part of their critical mineral security policy, are perhaps planning not to encourage used EV export out. So I was curious to hear the remarks.
Anybody wants to talk about used electric vehicles? I can tell you, in Kenya, when I drive around, I see more and more of them every day.
Well, I think I'm not sure if my microphone's. Yes, it is. I think what's important to at least follow in the next couple of years is, if we are exporting good quality cars, or are we exporting cars that have batteries that have such bad quality that they will end up being value less waste. If it's valuable waste, then I also see your point, of course, because then everyone sees an economic interest. But we have to make sure that we're not exporting the bad cars, also the electric ones, but the same goes for fossil fuel cars. We have to make sure that we set standards. And if cars are being exported, then we have to know what happens with the batteries at the end of the life cycle, for example, because we don't want to export the problem from Europe, in this case, to other parts of the world. So I think we will still need to pay attention to it, because as you rightly said, cars are being exported, and there will be many of them.
Remember what the gentleman from Nigeria said. In West Africa, they're now introducing a 5-year maximum age for used vehicles. They get all their vehicles from Western Europe. Imagine, Western Europe is going to go fully electric in 2035. That means that all those countries importing from Europe will automatically go electric just 5 years later. Isn't that wonderful? But then we need to see what regulation we need and what policies we need to make sure, indeed, we separate those that have no life and those still that contribute to the mobility in Africa. Ms. Monseyen.
I would actually want to comment on this specific questions, because when I mentioned about both you and I mentioned on the electric vehicles. At EC, when I was talking that we work on regulations and standards for the entire process, starting with the resources that are used, for example, in batteries, we want to make sure that also there is a very important traceability. So I have, I think, 3 divisions. I have my colleagues from the transport, and I think there is someone from the energy division that works on this, and the trade division for traceability. Also, before we get to the used stage part, in our work, it was very important that we work with the producers, with the that we ensure higher. So at least we set the higher standards that I think we have for the battery 30% at least in 8 years. After 8 years, that was a standard that was set within the experts group and the EC work. So that was very important. We set these standards together with the members, working on them. Now we get to the used, once they are used. The work that is now, the regulations that we are working with all the countries, it covers all transport types of transport, including electric vehicles. So the work covers this as well. So it's good news, I would say, in a term. So we are not ignorant, because the work on electric is not new. It's been for a long time, and this is already happening in terms of export.
Thank you very much. I think those standards are crucial.
All right. Is my mic on? Thank you very much. So Ghana is also doing quite a lot when it comes to EVs. So what we've been doing so far is, although EV is very new in our region, we have been able to have and launch an EV policy. I think last 2 days, the president of Ghana launched the EV policy in the Ghana pavilion. And these are to check so that we do not have some unscrupulous ways of doing EVs in the country. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I saw a hand all in the back. And for that one first and then that one, okay? So I need to run.
Sorry about that. My name is Ben Scott. I'm from Carbon Tracker. We're a financial think tank looking at the impact of climate change on financial markets. My question was around what was discussed earlier about Nigeria and the new refining capacity that's going online very, very soon. As far as I'm aware, Nigeria is a net importer of transport fuels. So my question is, will this new refining capacity be able to meet local demand for those transport fuels, or will there still be a dependency on other countries for the imports of those transport fuels?
Well, all right, thank you for that question. The Dangote refinery that is built to come on stream early next year has a refining capacity of 650 barrels per day stream, which is basically enough to cater for the domestic use. So in essence, with that and the other 4 NNPCL refineries with the capacity of 445,000 barrels per day, we also have other modular refineries at the moment adding about 11,000 barrels per stream day. So all that combined will make Nigeria not only self-sufficient but also an exporter of the refined products.
Thank you very much. Behind you.
Thank you for the study first and for the wonderful panel and discussion. My name is Yann Briand. I'm working for an international think tank on climate and development policies. And actually, I wanted to ask you a question about the ongoing proposal at the EU level regarding the proposal that I learned, was published this year. I wanted to know about the next step in the agenda regarding the key milestone that we can expect, this year at the EU level, and what are the main challenges? I don't know, the intermediate maybe a step to be able to then come out with a stronger regulation on that point. Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody want to take this? I'm also happy to elaborate.
I'm not exactly sure what the time frame is at the moment. I think our goal is also to use the next UNEP 6 conference to really continue the discussion on the fuels. But you see that Europe is really working on it. Maybe someone of the team knows the exact timing when we expect a proposal.
I think that
there's someone maybe from our team who knows it.
Sorry, no, I don't know the exact timing, but I know that it is in negotiations at the moment. So we are in the first phase of the decision making. It is now within Council.
I think a proposal has been launched and it's up to summer 24 for Member States to comment on it. A first reading has been presented to Member States, which has been received very positively by Member States. And now Member States are to review and to provide inputs, and the target is summer 24 to finalize this.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, under the Belgian presidency. There was another question here.
François. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, François from UNEC in Geneva. So as our executive secretary said, indeed, we are working on all the durability aspects of battery of electric vehicles. So this is both in EU legislation as part of the Euro 7 proposal and the US legislation. So we know we have a visibility of at least 8 years for cars where we're sure that the battery will last and don't degrade too much. And now we're working for the same for heavy duty and for vans. For vans, it will be 10 years, and for heavy duty, probably even longer. So this is already low in some of the key regions, which will be EV exporters in the coming years. I had a question for the two African representatives from Nigeria and from Ghana. Do you have a strategy in terms of how do you want your vehicle market to shift? I mean, do you want to still rely on used vehicle from the north countries, or maybe you want to maybe switch to new vehicles, maybe cheaper from other regions to keep the same level of let's say, affordability? Or what's your view? I mean, do you have kind of an industrial strategy to say, okay, we want to get rid of used vehicle imports, but rather switch to new vehicles from maybe other regions? Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to go first, Nigeria or Ghana?
All right.
You have a strategy, and what does it look like?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. In Ghana, I think we have a quite very encouraging situation now. We have the Customs, Excise and Preventive Service, which regulates the importation of used vehicles, and then we are so strict on that. So we place a higher import duties on used vehicles. The higher the year, the more you pay. So and that is also to discourage people from bringing heavy used cars into the country. And one aspect also is that the president has initiated assembly plant in collaboration with certain manufacturers. I think VW has an assembly plant in Ghana, and Toyota also has an assembly plant in Ghana. We also has some other few assembly plants in the country. This is also to help so that they could have new cars which are still affordable, so that it will be accessible to the country.
Does that mean you think that over time you will import less and less used vehicles and you produce more and more vehicles in Ghana yourself?
So the whole idea is to produce more vehicles in Ghana, which is why we have the assembly plants in the country.
And are those vehicles that you're now starting to produce meeting quality regulations? Have Ghana set standards for those vehicles?
Certainly, there are standards. The standards that are already in place are still in place. Then the standards are being in place so they do not flout all those vehicular distractions.
Okay, thank you. Nigeria?
In the Nigerian case is that we have the National Automotive Development Council, which has a master plan in terms of development of local capacity when it comes to assembly of new cars. That has been going on. We have the Innoson Motors, and they are doing both the conventional ICEs, internal combustion engine cars, and also the electric cars. And we have set up and launched 3 component and testing centers in Nigeria, both for component that goes into manufacturing of these cars. So that's on one hand, in addition to having age limit restriction on importation of used car. But on the transition, what Nigeria has done is to adopt natural gas as the transition fuel. And keen into that, Nigeria were encouraging the use of CNG in a way to decarbonize the transport system, where we retrofit most of our cars. That initiative is ongoing. It has kicked off, and a number of cars in Nigeria are going into this process of retrofitting them with the capacity to use CNG as means of powering the vehicle. But coming back to electric vehicle, to just 2 days ago, the president of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Tinubu, has launched the development or going into acquiring basically over 1,000 electrical buses. So that will go in a long way, in our journey, towards first developing capacity and improving local production of this vehicle, and also, keen into, our transition agenda using natural gas, decarbonize the transport system.
Thank you. Yes, I think the link between used vehicles and electric vehicles is very interesting. There's a number of African countries with introducing a used vehicle policy that are putting in place special measures for used electric vehicles. And so used vehicle policy is actually quite important for the global electrification of our fleet. For example, Egypt, they are now promoting the import of used electric vehicles. And there are many more countries that are now putting taxation in place where they regulate used vehicles, and in doing so, they give special treatment for used electric vehicles. So this is also an example how regulating used vehicles can actually speed up the electrification of the fleet globally. Thank you. Any more questions? Gentleman here. The microphone is coming.
Thank you. My name is Kusajima from Toyota Motor Corporation in Japan. And not a question, but let me comment the two things. The one is the issue for the traceability. The Toyota has already introduced the GPS system for the new car in the past couple of years. And of course, technologically speaking, that we can trace, Toyota can trace the new vehicle throughout all over the world. But there exists the problem of the barrier for the regulation, especially for the data regulation by each country, which prohibits the data crossing the border from their countries. So how to trace, how to make the good traceability for the company like Toyota, or maybe the other OEM that will be the same situation, and to solve the problem of the local the data regulation issues. That is one point. Second is the trading of the used vehicle, and basically for the HS code problem exists, I guess. So a lot of vehicles currently are flowing to the Africa or some other global south regions, not for the used car, but most of the car will be imported from the bigger parts, the source of the bigger parts like brakes or tires, or blah, blah, blah. So amending this kind of regulation, how to fix the used car, not the used the bigger parts, and how to monitor this kind of the loophole of the exporting, the trading loopholes. That is the second issue, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. As you see many hands, so I'm going to take 2 or 3, if you don't mind, and then give them to the panel. Gentleman sitting next to the gentleman from Japan. Please introduce yourself and.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ahmad Mungadi. I'm from NMDPRA, Nigeria. Just like Mr. Toyota has said, I believe what is important in us achieving our targets in these clean fuels and used cars meeting standards is actually more effective collaboration and then being more responsible. In terms of collaboration, we have Nigeria particularly and the Netherlands have gone very far. Netherlands is actually doing very well in leading getting clean fuels across the world. But as we all know, different countries have different priorities. If we leave individual countries to take decisions on how we move in this direction, we will not be able to effectively or timely get to the destination we want. Just like we are discussing generally around the climate action. This is just a subset actually. We must collaborate more. Because as far as there is demand and there is supply, there will be movement of bad products and of used cars. And that is the case as it is now. So Netherlands or Belgium or any individual country taking certain decisions in exclusion will not actually allow us to reach our expected targets. And then on the other part is responsibility. We can still see from the points of origin you can still see certain products or certain equipment that are not supposed to live in the ports. Certain things shouldn't live where they are living and arriving where they are arriving. There should be more responsibility, actually, on the parts of supply. So these two, I think we can all relate to them. We need to give them more action. This is a good discussion. We can expand it, let it be much global so that we'll have effective control and we'll reach where we want to. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you raised very important questions: responsibility, collaboration, and action. Just to reflect on the fact that the policy that the Commission is now proposing states we will implement the standards of African countries in Europe. But it's the African countries that will dictate what the standard is, and we will help them implement it. Because what we don't want is that vehicle that doesn't meet the Nigerian standards leaves the Rotterdam port because it's never shipped back. But at the same time, it's up to the African countries to set the standards of the vehicles they want. The beauty, I think, of the European Commission regulation is that it says we leave the standards to set by the African countries, and when they inform us, we will try and help to make sure they're not getting exported from Europe to Africa. So I think that's a good example of collaboration and responsibility. I think I'll give the floor to the panel now to reflect to some of the things that were said. We also talked about circularity, so many big issues, and then we'll take the other round of questions after that. Maybe from this time I start on this side. Nigeria, anything you want to reflect on what you just heard?
Yeah, so two things actually. One, I'm glad to hear from the minister that the European Union have launched a regulation, for roadworthiness for cars that are being exported from Europe. That's a very good approach, because prior to now, we know that most of the cars that have been imported to us, or we import, you export, are actually cars that have no any worth when it comes to roads. So it's good. It's good to hear that. I would also like to maybe cement on my colleague's point. What we have in Africa, as it's evolving, is fractured approach by individual countries. Unlike in Europe, where you have an European standard, both on the export and import of vehicle. So it would be nice to not just to have the sub-regional approach, as is being the case now, to have a unified approach across the country, because most of the import we get cars from different continents, from Europe, from America, from Asia. Another point is the criteria we normally use as part of our standard is based on age limit. We're not actually looking at the standard. So what that means that is, imported cars from different regions are not on the same, criteria when it comes to age. I know the European Union, you have the United Nations Economic Council of Europe, which we base your standard on. And if you're going to kind of apply that standard to the imported cars in Nigeria, I know most of the cars, from America, Canada, and so forth, will not pass that test because of the cost that will to go into homologation and retesting of this vehicle. So we should actually look inward and, maybe develop our own standard, that key into these standards.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wekers, any observations?
Yes, I would like to give two reflections. One is to underline again the importance of international collaboration. International collaboration, let's say, with the think tanks, with the UN agencies, but also between countries, bilateral or multilateral. And I'm very proud that in the Benelux, the three founding fathers, Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, the three founding fathers of the European, cooperate in a way that we can pave the way also for broader European collaboration and setting the standards. And what we don't want to use anymore in our countries because of pollution, then it's not on to export those products. I think the meeting this morning is also good to hear some best practices. also best practices in Africa. I was pleased to hear from you, Minister, that you said, well, we introduced a tax system that the older the car, the higher the import duties are. Well, I think that's a very effective way. Between 2010 and 2014, I used to be State Secretary for Finance in the Netherlands, and I was responsible for taxation and taxation policies. And I introduced back in time a new tax system for cars. And that was based on the carbon footprint of the cars. The smaller and the cleaner the cars, the lesser the taxation for the cars. And the higher the carbon footprint, the higher the taxation. And it was a progressive taxation. So the higher the carbon footprint, 10 times higher, more or less, the tax. And that was a real good measure to get in a few years' time a relatively new and clean car fleet in the Netherlands. So my second comment is use tax incentives to make people aware that it's not only for, let's say, the clean air, but also for their own wallet better to use cleaner cars.
Wow, thank you very much. That is a very good call for action. Mr. Adom, Ghana?
Yeah, so just as I was only still going to talk about what I said earlier, the tax system. That is to make it uncomfortable for the importers to be able to bring in these cars. You will not be able to put a total ban on it because of some regulations. However, if you use these taxes, it deters them from bringing in more of these vehicles. Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot has been said already by my other panel members. I think what's very important is to have uniformity in policy. That's really going to be the next step. And that's why it's important that Europe is taking the lead, and at least we have one standard coming from Europe. It also means that the countries where we export to, they have the opportunity to also know where they have to speak to. We have another guest coming in, one of the speakers, so she probably also can give an opinion on that. Hello. No, but I think common standards are now really being key in the next couple of years.
I think harmonization is key, and I'm very good to hear the harmonization at the European level. It's very good to remember, and I think the gentleman from Nigeria mentioned this, that there's also harmonization happening in Africa. West Africa already put harmonized standards. East Africa already said, these are the vehicles and the fuels we want to receive, and these are the vehicles and the fuels we don't want to receive. Southern Africa community, SADC, is also in the process. So harmonization is happening on both sides, on the importing side, on the exporting side. I'm happy to see that our mystery guest has arrived. Welcome. We knew you were a bit late, but thank you for joining us, Inger. We have a very interactive panel. There's many questions. Maybe we give you a little bit the floor to say a few things about used vehicles. Just sit down.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much to both the Netherlands as well as to ministers assembled here, largely, especially from Africa and the African continent, but also beyond. Congratulations. Really, what I would want to say is that, and I'm afraid I may say things that have already been said, in which case you press the fast forward button. But, you know, we understand that we are about to add a truckload, literally, of 1 billion new cars on our roads, right? And if we just have the scenario continue as we were, and we also understand that we are exporting substandard vehicles, and we are exporting unclean fuels. But Africa is saying, hang on a minute, more and more, and I just heard you say that, but it's a very important message. Netherlands has said we are not going to export substandard fuel anymore, and Africa has said, hang on a minute, we don't want substandard fuel. One, because it impacts on climate, but two, it impacts on the health of our children and and the adults. But we know that children are especially susceptible to childhood asthma, etc. So that is a very important move, and bravo for making that happen. Now, as we know, we need to move further and faster to do our jobs in a modern economy. So the question then is, are we going to do that by personal cars? Are we going to do that by designing our cities more smartly and more densified? Are we going to do that by investing in public transport? Are we going to do that in having multiple ways of urban mobility? And I hope that it will be the latter end and not on the more car dimension, of course. And if it has to be more cars, surely we don't want substandard cars. Bravo to the countries in Africa that have said Euro 4 and nothing more for 5 years, 8 years. Some limits have been set. Bravo for that, because we don't want these old cars driving around the continent. Road safety is bad, and we have appalling road safety record on the continent, sad but true. And so increasing that by having better quality cars is clearly where we want. We're not opposed to used vehicles, but we are opposed to substandard vehicles, and obviously we would like to see a lift to electric mobility, which is already happening across the continent. A lot of it in two-wheelers and three-wheelers and buses, but certainly also four-wheelers are beginning to make their way, which is very, very exciting. And so I think that this is critical. I really have to say that the more we work together with the exporters, the importers, the better it is. And of course, to the Europeans in this audience, I say, you know, the day you buy your e-vehicle, don't think that you stop polluting, because a new vehicle that you bought, that you now sold, may well be on the road for another 30 years. So there is a responsibility here to ensure that it gets handled responsibly, right? And that's a collective responsibility that we all have. So there's really an amazing opportunity as Africa has come together and frankly said, we don't want substandard fuels, we don't want hazardous vehicles, we want safe and vehicles to increase our road safety, and that matters a lot. We from UNEP, under this amazing gentleman's leadership, Rob de Jong, who heads our mobility and division, we stand very, very ready to work. I think we are working now in 37 countries, or up. In Africa, how many?
In Africa, yeah, that's about 35.
35. You see, I know my numbers here. At any rate, in the continent, but obviously on the world scale, a much larger number. And we are going to be launching a number of critical new reports that goes along with the technical assistance that we provide to many, many countries when they so ask. What's particularly helpful is when the regional economic commissions sort of set some rules, whether it's SADC, East African Community, ECOWAS, etc., and of course the African Union, set some market-wide rules, because that enables a better market. It may be that Accra or Port Harcourt are the places where the imports are happening, but they may very well be unsold into other countries, and therefore having those regional economic commissions doing their work. As we get more and more electrified, we have to talk about what we do with the batteries, what happens to them end of life. There are some significant environmental dimensions to that. So that's kind of the next stage. Can we, in Africa, think about the installation of the capacity so that the reuse and reconditioning of end-of-life batteries can be on the continent rather than exporting them back, and so that the jobs and the opportunities can also be kept in the continent. Sorry for, and you should have stopped me if I spoke about things that have already been said, but I am just so proud of what this collective community has done, the real leadership we have seen from the Netherlands, bravo, and the real leadership we've seen from African leaders, bravo. Without it, we would not be where you are today. So this is a real privilege to serve you at this, on this road. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Inge. And we were in the middle of a very interesting conversation. There are many questions. I'm proposing I take a few more because people have been raising their hand, and then we start wrapping up. And as a head up to the panel, I would like to talk about in your wrapping up what is next, because everybody talks about everything is wonderful and we're doing very well, but we're not there yet globally. So what are our next steps? But I'll give you a moment to think about that, because this gentleman, sorry, sir. I think you had your hand up for a long time, and then behind there also, I take those two questions, quick responses, and then.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Odafe Atebe. I'm also from Nigeria. I work with the NMDPRA. So there's been a lot of discussions in the room this morning on, cleaner fuels, decarbonizing the transport sector. But what I didn't hear, or maybe what I was also hoping to hear, was something on biofuels, right? So because it's one aspect of transport fuel that we're considering back home in Nigeria, and see how we can make regulations for a biofuel policy. So I'd like to know, we've had several discussions with companies from the West, and by the West I mean the States, on what they're doing with biofuel, E10, E20, in diesel as well. What is going on in Europe? Is this some form of something you guys are willing to adopt? Are you considering biofuels in Europe? What's it like? How the regulations working? How does it impact vehicles and stuff like that, so that we can also learn from your experience? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman behind you.
Hi, my name is Friedel. I'm with the Kühne Foundation, and our focus is on logistics. So I'm curious about the role of used trucks. We've mostly spoken about the car sector. So yeah, maybe you can enlighten me to what extent this is covered in the discussions, in the regulations, and the standards in terms of import-export in the EU or in the regional commissions. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question? No? Yes. Final question for you, and then we go to the panel.
Thank you. I was curious because EU has also passed its plans to ban the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles locally. I'm talking about new vehicles. I was curious, what are EU's plans about export of internal combustion engine vehicles? The exports of internal combustion engine vehicles, new ones. Because it's a global problem, not just a local problem. If you're banning it locally, are you also planning to ban exports?
Okay. I think this time we start with Minister Heine. Yeah. Any reflections on some of the things that were talked about? Biofuels, we talked about heavy-duty vehicles.
To come back to your point, I think it's not a discussion taking place, but it is an important point that you're raising. So this might be something to discuss. Then when it comes to biofuels, of course, we have European discussions on it, and also what we find acceptable. And I think that it's important for other continents to also think about the standards that they are willing to have, because that's a bit how we're doing it also with the export of vehicles. We are asking other countries to also set standards, and we want to live up to it. So I think that is probably the best way to go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Ron?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we are all talking about this in terms of transitioning. I think talk about biofuels. We are moving into EVs, and I think transitioning from one point to another, I think it will take you some time for you to embrace everything. So you cannot just embrace everything at once, but with time you progressively try to embrace everything. I think it's a good thing to also consider the biofuels.
Thank you. Mr. Wilkes? Any?
Well, maybe just to repeat what I earlier said, to join forces and to table in as much as expert groups, as well on the political level, in the Benelux, in the European Union, UN agencies, but also in our bilateral contacts with many African countries, to set standards and to apply those standards.
Thank you. Nigeria?
Yes, on biofuel, as you rightly mentioned, we have a biofuel policy and incentive that has been gazetted since 2007. At the moment, we've been in discussion with the U.S. Grand Council, and we're looking at, drafting a regulation in the adoption of that within the ecosystem. But let me just put it into context. There's a lot of benefit when it comes to adoption of biofuel. And to put Nigeria into context again, we kind of like consume 45 million liters per day. And if you're going to adopt the E10, for example, in our PMS, that means blending with about 4.5 million liters per day. And what that does is it does a lot of things it's very good environmentally, health-wise. It reduces decarbonize the process. And more importantly, also increase the octane number of the car. So it's very important. Going back to there was a question on heavy-duty vehicle as well. So the ECOWAS regulation that was adopted last year came into play, actually has differentiate between the low-duty vehicle and the heavy-duty vehicle. It gives 5 years as the age limit for importation of LDVs, and 10 years for the limit for the importation of HDV. So I believe it's for member countries, to look at within the allowance of compliance, which is 10 years, to see how we can key into this regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Just a couple of points. On biofuels, obviously, we understand very much the climate benefit on the emission side. We do have to consider replacement, that we grow fuel as opposed to growing food. We use the water for growing fuel as opposed to growing food. We use agricultural land, we use pesticides, insecticides, fertilizers, all of that. So in that bigger calculation, this has to be part of the calculation. Did we displace tropical forest? Did we displace natural habitat that would otherwise be a carbon sink? So the calculation is a little bit broader, the system's boundaries. It's not a yes or no, it is a let's make sure we look at the full system's boundary. That was the point one. The second point that I just want to mention is that in respect to the heavy duty vehicles question from the gentleman at the back, just to say that like we came out with a report on the light duty last year, I think it was, 2 years ago, time flies, we are coming out with a report on the heavy duty vehicle at UNEA 6 in February, March of next year, just so that you know it's on the cards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm told we have 5 minutes, so now we have to choose between another round of the panel or wrap-up comments on my side. So I think we're going to try to do both by asking the panel just to say one sentence on what next, if I can be so. Ms. Heinen, what's next?
Good cooperation between all parts of the world and legislation.
Thank you. Mr. Adom?
Well, I was just musing on one thing whilst we were having this discussion about the importation of used vehicles. I was also thinking if this manufacturers could also make affordable engines, because since the engine is the main part that causes the issues, why would they not make affordable engines that will be available on the market, so that it will also help replacement, so there wouldn't be too much trouble on the roads. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next step, after, let's say, sort of Benelux legislation, next step will be next year European legislation, for my part.
Very good. Nigeria?
For Nigeria, is West Africa as a sub-region, we have a harmonized regional approach to clean fuel and used vehicle. So Nigeria, making up half of the population of West Africa, has a clear line of sight of achieving that with the coming of Dangote refineries next year and all that. Yeah, well, in addition to, utilizing and deepening the utilization of natural gas in decarbonizing our transport system, NGVs for that matter. So.
Okay, thank you. UNEP?
I think I should leave it to you, but I will just say that we will continue to push very hard both on the cleaner fuels as well as on e-mobility, and we're very, very keen also to see assembly and/or production on the continent, not just the import. And we're pleased to see that assembly is already happening, especially of two-wheelers and three-wheelers and buses. So the more we can see that, it creates jobs, opportunities, etc. But anyway, you should get the final word.
Maybe first, before I do a wrap-up, some appreciation for the panel. It's going to be very difficult to summarize a very intensive discussion we had. What strikes me is the gentleman from Nigeria started off by saying, some years ago we said we stopped using leaded petrol, and we did it. And I don't see any reason why in the next year or two we cannot have adopted worldwide a minimum quality standard of fuel and a regulation on the quality of used vehicles. Today we've heard very many support from the recipients, the importers, very many support from the exporters, but also action. Action by the Netherlands, action by Benelux, action by the European Commission, action by ECOWAS, action by SADC, etc. So I think we really have a golden opportunity, all of us, in the next year to bring that all together and basically say in 1 year from now, we've done it. We've introduced the fuels and vehicle standards that the countries have asked for. I think we're very close, and I hope we can work all together. As UNEP will keep pushing this. Next step is the Environment Assembly, end of February, where we bring all the countries together. I already know that some of you in this audience from Africa and Europe are intending to bring this to the Council to see if we can take that next global step. So I hope we can work together to achieve this. I thank you very much for joining us today, and have a fantastic day. Thank you.